Hi there, this is Bill Burnett,
And Dave Evans.
and we're here to talk about refreshing your Designing Your Life toolkit. If you'll remember, there's a sort of a quick version of Designing Your Life that Dave came up with one day when we were up in Canada trying to get on a TV show, and they cut our space from 7 minutes to 3 minutes. And they said, you got to explain the whole thing in 3 minutes, and Dave came up with this amazing thing. It's the 4 steps for doing Designing Your Life. Step one, get curious. Step two, talk to people. Step three, try stuff. And step four, tell your story. So we're going to walk through those 4 steps with you just to refresh you and also to kind of maybe update it for the COVID-19 reality that we're all dealing with right now. Dave, tell me about step one.
Get curious. So get curious. Again, why is that step one? Is because we want to start with the human energy. It's all about, oh, how interesting. We're doing generative things that pull our lives forward. So I want to get curious. And we talk about curating your curiosity. Right now, we all have probably more reflective time on our hands than we're used to. We have more screen time probably on our hands than we're used to. It's a great time to curate your curiosity generatively. That does not mean curating conspiracy theories about COVID-19. That does not mean rereading scary articles that don't tell you anything new. That's not curiosity, that's compulsion. Let's not confuse those two. But curiosity, like, what would I love to know more? Gee, I haven't had time to think about Impressionism and where it really came from. I was always curious about that in art school, in my art class, 101 years ago back in school, never got back around to it. Now's a great time to curate the curiosities that are going to be generative for you, both personally as an expansion of your life and even professionally. So start with curiosity. Then you're going to go and talk to people. Why do we talk to people, Bill?
Well, we talk to people because that's where the world of stories lives. That's where the world of personal, interactions live, and that's also where we find out about potential jobs or other things that might be interesting. And there
You
has
actually think
never.
talking to people is a prototype? A conversation is a prototype?
It's absolutely a prototype because it's a chance to live inside someone else's story for a little bit, see if that story resonates with you, and whether or not there's some information in that story that rekindles a curiosity or makes you even want to go out and try something. So I don't think there's ever been a better time to get a hold of people because a lot of people, just like you, are sitting in front of their screen. And there are times when there's nothing else to do, and people are happy to schedule 15 minutes, 20 minutes of a Zoom conversation or whatever technology you're using just to connect and tell their story. In fact, I'm starting instruction at Stanford next week. We've got a 10-week quarter. It's all going to be online. It's going to be very unusual. And I've noticed that it's so easy to get guest speakers. In fact, I can get amazing guest speakers because they don't have to come to campus. They don't have to park. They don't have to be there when class is on. And so this is really a great time to practice the prototyping of talking to people and having these kinds of prototype conversations, which will lead to new actions, new stories, and a whole bunch of things. We've kind of charted this. When our students go out and do 10 or 15 of these, something starts to happen inside the network of people that they now know. And we have been, at this point, there's no reason you couldn't do 2 or 3 of these every day.
And they are the best way to get invited to try stuff. But before we get to that third step, I want to double down the scientific backing for the importance of talking to people. Even if you're job searching, the best way to get a job is not ask for a job. The best way to get a job is ask for the story. Now, is that really a good way to get the decision-making process to work for you? Yes, according to our colleague Dan Gilbert in the psychology department at Harvard University, pretty good school on the other coast, and he talks about simulation versus surrogation. This is a scientific study on simulation, meaning I'm thinking about a decision based on, I gathered a bunch of data. I did a bunch of analysis, I did a bunch of Googling, I read some articles, I got the facts, and then I
list or whatever.
Thought in my head, I simulated the reality that, gee, if I took that job, it would be like this. If I moved to that city, it would be like this. And now I'm simulating using information inside my head to imagine the world I would live in if I made this decision. And now I'm going to go make that decision. Okay, that's one approach to prioritizing how you think about data when deciding. Another approach is go talk, hey, I talked to my friend Bill, he's what his experience is like. And that's a surrogation. I'm borrowing his experience. There are long articles on this, but nonetheless, the bottom line is surrogation is a much more effective means of evaluating the future than simulation. You want both working for you, But most people think like, oh, I'm the smart guy. Just give me the data. I'll figure it out. I'm not sure Bill's just like me. Actually, Bill's another human being and you're a human being. Hearing a human to human story, even if it's a different person than you, your human person can interpret the difference. Bill and I know how we're not the same guy. And when Bill describes something, I can actually tell better by hearing Bill's discussion about going to this bar or having listened to this music. That is a better piece of information for me than reading an analytical article about it. I'll just going to say that getting really good at talking to people means you have become an effective surrogationist. And you're using the right tools to do smart things well. And again, if you do that well, that's just the backdrop. With lots of good reasons to do what we are recommending. Um, and when I have lots of conversations, stuff comes up, including invitations to maybe even not just chat about it, but go try something. And gee, in the time of COVID, Bill, is trying stuff a little bit different.
Well, it's going to be quite different actually, right? Because we have social distancing, so we can't go do stuff directly with people, but we can still get together, and we can still get together, of course, on Zoom. And there's still prototypes that we can run. The trying stuff phase is really the prototyping phase. I've got this idea. I got curious. I talked to some people. I wonder if a site that indexes country music singers that all grew up in Tennessee would be an interesting thing. And now I'm going to want to try something. This is also where we really, really want to go back to the big idea in book number 2, which was set the bar low
And clear it
and clear it. You
often.
don't need to try a big thing. You need to try something you could maybe get done this afternoon after your last Zoom call, or maybe get it done, between now and Wednesday. And so what we're suggesting is that there are still opportunities to prototype your way into the future, setting the bar really, really low, and just having 1 or 2 experiences that give you another piece of data of your own felt experience of trying to do this sort of thing. In my neighborhood, the district attorney happens to live in my neighborhood, and they did a thing where they just they have a big Victorian house, and they sat at the top of the stairs, and they put some chairs at the bottom of the stairs, and they had an impromptu event where people got to know the district attorney, who lives across the street, but the neighbors hadn't come over to say hi. That's a really simple.
Which points out that the world is really willing to set the bar low right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody's in the same constrained boat. Everybody's in the same, got dry hands and, running out of alcohol. We're all, and being very careful about toilet paper. We're all in the same boat. So people's willingness to compromise, like, well, no, I don't think I can get to, there's a couple in town my wife and I have been trying to get together for dinner with for over a year unsuccessfully. But on very short notice, we could sit on the lawn 6 feet apart and just have a human experience like, hey, how's it going, Dave and Hillary? So, boy, I think the possibility of try stuff is one for which while it may first and foremost feel like, oh, I can't because I'm stuck in my house or people aren't available. Yeah, but the way they're available is more available than they were before. So a smaller thing is more available than the big thing that you thought maybe you could get later. So the small things might be available electronically. And then tell your story. So when you do this, you tell your story. Well, that's just the other side of surrogation. Again, before this call started with recording on, Bill and I chatted, well, how's it going? What are you learning? What's going on? It's a really good time in tell your story to be a reflective person. What am I learning? What am I growing? What do I have to say that isn't just repeating myself about the current crisis or about fear, as opposed to, here's an interesting question about my curiosity being curated. Here's an interesting thing I learned from one of my conversations with another person. Here's an interesting thing I learned about the situation that I didn't know. So picking what you have been learning and reflecting on what's going on that's generative and positive, that's the story to be telling. There might be certain circles where the story you're telling is the story of the grief process you're going through with COVID or the stress process. But if you get really clear on what the story is and you're not just repeating the same one over and over again, it will feel much more productive. And it is absolutely the way to keep the process going.
Yeah, and we are living through an extraordinary and an unprecedented time. This is the first global world pandemic. Probably not the last, but the first.
First time a global economy has voluntarily simply shut itself largely down for some period of time.
So imagine that you did tell your story. Imagine you actually started, you started that journal you've always said you're going to start, or you started that blog, or you just started writing stuff down. And 20 years from now, your kids or your grandkids read the stories of what it was like to go through the world's first global pandemic. That would be a real gift to other people if you could record that, both from your own personal experience and the experience of how it's going for your neighbors, how it's going in your town. What are you doing to help other people in this situation? We are going to live through an extraordinary time. My son works for a congressman in Washington, D.C., and I've challenged him to keep a journal because this is an extraordinary time in DC. In addition to an impeachment and a bunch of other things, we're now, going through this whole process, and each of us has maybe a unique point to observe from. And so these stories are really part of a much larger global story. And it's how we exchange information. There's a thing in the new book about a researcher in the UK who says storytelling makes you sexier, or storytelling increased the ability of certain individuals to procreate because we love stories. It's how we engage with each other. It's how we share our realities. So tell your story.
So that's it. Once again, it's a real it's technically 4 sentences, not one. We were asked for a 1-sentence version of the book. I gave him 4, but it's only 10 words. Get curious, talk to people, try stuff, tell your story. It fits on a rubber band on your arm. And that's no news. We haven't changed our mind about that in terms of what the simple thing is. But when you look through the COVID lens, it just frankly has even more power. We're not trying to be Pollyannas here. We're not pretending this isn't a hard time. We're not pretending it's trivial, like, oh, great, what a great way for us to go do design. What we're saying is, we're privileged guys. We're very privileged guys. We acknowledge that we both had successful careers. We've got some money. We've got people around us. We've got houses. We're, right now I've got enough toilet paper for a little while. And we're not pretending that's not true. And some people are listening to this are in much more constrained situations, perhaps, or much scarier situations.
Right.
And that's true. We're not pretending that's not true. I wish I had a magic wand to solve this thing. We don't. And design doesn't have a magic wand. But what we are saying is, wherever you are, whatever is going on, how can you adapt into as generative as possible a way of living through this season? And we actually do think, quite sincerely, that getting curious, talking to people, trying stuff, and telling your story can help you get through this thing and help you get through this thing a little bit better. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for your time.